Yo, 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 yo. Welcome to the Lions Den. All right, family. So we are here on our own platform because there has been a multitude of mistreatment on these other platforms in which we do not have the opportunity as Hebrew Israelites to bring forth our strong reasoning. We're getting cut off, we're getting interrupted, and we're ultimately getting mistreated on other platforms. So we here at the Lions Den, we have our own platform. Over 690,000 views, over 3,000 subscribers. So what we're trying to do is give a place not only for Hebrews, but anybody that wants to come on here to bring forth information. We want to give them an opportunity to express themselves scholastically. So we want to cut down on the confusion, because if your information is valid and your wisdom stands, it doesn't matter what the opponent is bringing forth. You should be able to deal with it. All right. So our brother was a part of the Lions Den, one of the founders, Don Pro Rizzo, right, has been cut off a multitude of times. So we're going to allow him to come on this platform to bring forth some of his information and express his views on his treatment as of late on these other platforms. Don, you there?
I'm here.
All right, brother. The floor is yours.
All right. Shalom, folks. Praise to the Most High Yahweh. So today we'll cover some things about DNA. We all talk about the uh, whole idea of ancestry along with DNA. We bring these into a lot of conversations concerning our people and how we know we're Hebrew Israelites. This is always the number one, uh, argument a lot of times when it comes down to certain tribes. For example, the Taino Indians or the Jamaicans, and et cetera, et cetera. The 12 tribe chart comes into play. We also find some of our people trying to deal with the E1, B1, and the J marker, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I'm not an expert in this area, but what I have found is we are really just regurgitating information. We're taking the white scientist information, and we are just painting a wide brushstroke with this information. We're not looking at both sides of the coins. So today, what I would like to do is bring out a point that's that is really or rarely talked about enough in these discussions. As with anything, when it comes down to scholarship or education, we really have to look at both sides of the coin. So, I want to talk about what is known as limitations of DNA testing. I want to educate us a little bit about it. So I'm gonna go to a few sources that are out there readily available. You can find information that anybody can put their hands on and grab and look at and consider when it comes down to DNA. There are certain factors affecting the performance of a test when it comes down to DNA. So I'm gonna read a little bit and pardon the noise. Some main factors to consider when dealing with DNA tests: the performance and the results of a test. When it comes down to molecular genetics, the quality and the quantity of the DNA that is actually extracted. I want to say it again. The main factors that affect the performance of molecular genetic tests are the quality and the quantity of the DNA that is actually being extracted. That's number one, right off the bat. And their guidelines providing what is followed. It is unusual for additional samples to be required. In other words, all it's saying is if you get, for example, you want to test the DNA of a monkey, you make sure you get the right quality and you have to make sure you have the right quantity. That's right off the bat. What you get to test is just as equally as important as what you are testing, how you are testing. And there's some failures with DNA. The main causes of failure to extract DNA, now we're dealing with the extraction part of it, is blood clotting due to the poor mixing with what is known as EDTA. That's an acronym. It's an anticoagulant or use of serum tube. I'll repeat it. One of the issues for improper results from a DNA test is blood clotting due to poor mixing with EDTA anticoagulant, almost like a blood thinner. Something, if for the common man, something like a blood thinner, anticoagulant, or the use of the serum tube itself. So that's 2 points. Now we get to learn a little bit about how DNA is actually processed. The use of anticoagulants other than EDTA or excessive what they call hemolysis following poor sample storage. That's another factor. Or excessive delays in sample transport. Did you get that? That's a lot. In the event of a failed extraction, a report with a request for additional sample will be sent to the referring clinician. So, say you extract something on Monday, and say by Thursday, we don't want to use this. Let's send for more. So there's a process for that. Or we used the wrong tube, or we didn't use the EDTA. There's certain factors. Yeah, and humans, you have to also factor in humans. We have we're not perfect people. We're not exactly accurate in everything we do. Sometimes we paint right, and sometimes we leave a spot. Sometimes we don't get it all together. You see what I'm saying? We're subject to human error, and that's well with anything, documents, just everyday practices. So as you can see here so far, there are conditions that have to be met. And that still doesn't guarantee you're going to get accurate results. Again, there's a process for all of this, and there's certain guidelines that need to be followed. So we'll read on a little bit more. And again, we're talking about the limitations of DNA. Certain genetic diseases, particularly those that require testing of several genes, may require more DNA than is obtained from the initial sample. Interpretation of some results may require or be aided by availability of samples from other family members. So, what are we saying here? The interpretation of results can determine, or they can lead us wrong, or they can lead us in the right direction as far as what we're looking for. You see, how one interprets the results of the DNA is just as important as the DNA itself. So, there's more for you. Let's talk a little bit about prenatal samples. Prenatal samples. Maternal cell contamination is another limitation. For prenatal samples, excessive maternal contamination of what they call fotile samples can produce problems with interpretation of tests. And here again is another limitation. Samples of maternal blood are routinely requested to allow fotile DNA to be identified by its different genotype. Now that's a lot of high jargon for some of us, especially for me. Without without such samples, it may be impossible to determine the identity of the DNA tested. So where do we get this fotile DNA when it concerns anyone, especially for us here in America? Where do we get it from? You see, that's an important question. We have to look at all the details. In other words, folks, and for the ones who already are privy to the whole uh, subject of the E1, B1, the J marker, things like that, one cannot determine who an Israelite is, a Hebrew, black Hebrew Israelite is in this country without these tests. But it is equally true to say one cannot disprove that we are Hebrew Israelites in this country because they don't have what is known as the evidence. We don't have it.
Right.
Do y'all understand that? I hope everybody understand what I just stated. This is the weakness in the argument from such ones who want to say, okay, they tested everybody in Africa, hypothetically speaking. And so, therefore, what we can see is nobody from America has the J marker. Well, how do you determine that without the full-tail DNA? You have no way of proving this or disproving it. Either
Right.
way, you're at a limit, and this is the limitation of DNA. Wow, that's a lot. Here's another one. Mosaicism. That's spelled Mosaicism. Mosaicism. It is a construct of mosaic and the suffix ism. In rare cases, mosaicism, the presence of two populations of cells with differing chromosome complements. It may be detected when analyzing the DNA of a tissue sample. The extent of mosaicism can vary substantially between different parts of an individual. I'll say it again. The extent of mosaicism can vary substantially between different parts of an individual. Let's just take the arms, for example.
Right.
In one arm, it may be different populations of cell presence as opposed to the other arm. Now, I'm going to step out on a limb for just a moment and pontificate. Let's say Joseph, we know from the scripture that he has an Egyptian wife. I'm pontificating. His son, Ephraim or Manasseh, we can use one. Let's say Ephraim. In one arm, he has the Hebrew cells. The other arm, he has the Egyptian cells. We're talking about cells on a molecular level. Is it possible for you to have a different group of cells in one arm as opposed to the other? I'm just using that for the example here. Now, of course, some scientists, wise guy, come along and say, well, it actually means when you break down and divide a plus b and divide it by xy squared, and you come up with xyz. I mean, that's we're not going that far into it. We're not scientists. We're looking at the limitation of a cell structure. And here's the point, because one, the right arm may be different cells from the left. So you need enough DNA extraction, and you have to have a good quality of it. It needs to be in a good test tube. See, there's factors involving this that goes beyond the simple general statement of, well, E1, B1, or J marker based on what? You may have a J marker in one arm and not in the other, or in one leg and it's not in the other, or right on through the human anatomy. The level in crucial organs or systems, plural, may not reflect that in the sample tested. In other words, if you just test the right arm, the level may not be there, you see, or in the brain, you know, or in the heart, or the liver, or the kidney, or in the saliva, or in the hair. It depends. It depends. And let's just say, for example, hypothetically speaking, you get, let's say you get 100 people from every nation on the planet, and you draw samples out of the right arm from every individual, and you do the same test again for the same people in the left arm. Are you going to get different results? Maybe, possibly. But the novice in this area, myself being included, I may make the mistake of thinking, well, they tested all the people, and therefore this is what the DNA result says. We're going to run with that. Well, the novice does not understand how DNA actually works because they don't understand the process. They do not see, again, the limitations. So you have to factor that in. So again, I'll read this one more time. The level in crucial organs or systems may not reflect that in the sample tested, with consequent uncertainty in expression of phenotypes associated with the observed abnormality. In other words, the mosaicism, which represents two types of populations of cells with different chromosomes complements. It can be detected or it may be missed. This, again, is the limitation of DNA. Now, so far, we have more than at least a half a dozen of different reasons why DNA is not reliable, where there can be different discrepancies in the testing, either in the handling or the quality, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, the average person who is not a scientist may not be aware of this, and so consequently, we are pontificating, you see, which I'm sure that even what I am stating now, a real scientist or DNA expert would have to correct me somewhere along the line. So you can't take this for 100% proof positive a person is one way or another without accurate testing. And we assume that these DNA companies and these researchers have all the facts. No, they do not. They do not. And we've seen this on some of the television networks, where one person would go in and they get their test. There was a black woman here, I forget her name right off, pardon my ignorance, but she gets on the show. I don't think it's Maury Povich somewhere, someone like that, Oprah. She does a test and she's excited about, oh, I come from such and such tribe. And then a few weeks later comes back with new results. And now she's crying on TV. She went from a state of ecstasy to a state of, oh my God, this is hopeless. I'll never figure out who I am. You see, again, limitations. It's just another example to say DNA is not the absolute authority of who you are or where you come from or anything else of the sort. It's not. Can't be relied on. So let's take a look at some other things here. And this comes
Okay,
from
okay. So you made an assertion,
mhm.
and I want to share my screen real quick just to show that clip in which you're referencing real quick, and I'll let you right back on that.
So that about.
Okay, con.
Tawa Smith Bay. This video is going to specifically address the DNA test and how it is a scam and a part of a bigger systematic agenda to further disconnect the autochthonous indigenous people of America from their land and to further disconnect them from their indigenous identity right here in America. This video is going to show, it's going to prove and explain to you how the DNA testing is not there yet. It's not as advanced as they make it for you to believe it is. They cannot take some saliva out your mouth and tell you, oh, this is what people you came from. This is what tribe you came from. It's not that advanced yet. I mean, you're looking at a people that to this day cannot copy the building of the pyramids of Teotihuacan.
Genealogy, researching family history, is one of the most popular hobbies in this country, right up there with gardening. A nation of immigrants, we almost all come from somewhere else we wish we knew more about. So searching for our roots holds tremendous appeal. And today there's an exciting new addition to the genealogist's toolkit, genetic genealogy. It turns out that inside each one of us, within every cell of our bodies, is information about who our ancestors were, where they lived, and who we're related to today. Our DNA contains hidden stories about our past, and scientists, together with businessmen, are now offering ways to help us read them.
Who am I? Why do I look the way I do? It's like discovering American history. It's like discovering American history. It's like discovering American history.
The American history I discovered is a common one, it turns out. Geneticist Rick Hills runs a company called African Ancestry that specializes in DNA testing for Black Americans. He says a full one-third of the men he tests find out they have a white male relative somewhere back in time.
How do people find this out react?
The black men get upset and say, look, I'm black, look at me, I'm black. And, and I said, yeah, you are, but this small segment of your DNA doesn't go back to Africa or Europe. We are a mosaic of many different ancestors. You can go back several generations, and there are hundreds of people, thousands of people who actually contribute to our DNA.
And that's the rub. This business of genetic genealogy is fraught with limitations. For one thing, it can only provide information about a tiny fraction of our ancestry. Because we get half our DNA from our mothers and half from our fathers, almost all of our DNA gets shuffled and remixed every generation, making it impossible to trace what comes from whom. There are just two bits of DNA that remain pure: the Y chromosome, which passes directly from father to son, and something called mitochondrial DNA, which passes unchanged from mother to child. Hank Greeley, a law professor at Stanford University, has studied this new field. He worries that people don't realize just how many ancestors they actually have.
8 generations ago, both you and I had 256 great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents.
Wait, you're saying that if you go back 8 generations, we have 256 great-great-great-grandparents?
Yes, doubles every generation. So you get 2 parents, you have 4 grandparents, you have 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great-grandparents, and it adds up fast. It adds up so fast and fast that if you go back 20 generations, you've got over 1 million grandparents.
1,048,576 to be exact. And in each generation, DNA testing can provide information about only two of them.
Floor is yours.
That's a very compelling video. Very compelling. So, according to a Penn State scientist, we have found that much of Black America, a good 70%, actually more, has at least some white ancestral DNA in their blood, actually, parents. That's what they state from their research. Does this mean that Black Americans come from white folks? No. Although most would agree, and I would say subjectively so, that most people would agree that you're the seed of your father. True, but just because you're in America and you have a white parent does not mean you originate from America as Black Hebrew Israelites. I want to say that. That's not going far enough back in time. Remember, we said there is a limitation with DNA, and as we have found, even as they're stating in the video, the Y chromosome stays constant. But what does that mean to a person who is a non-professional? They may misinterpret that for saying, well, like some say about Bob Marley, well, he's white. No, he's not white because his parent came from someone as well, just like his mother. There's two cells that remain pure. We get half of our DNA from our mother, the other half from our father. But what does that mean? Virtually nothing, other than just stating the facts. We're talking about on a molecular level, which is different. Again, I'll use the example of Joseph and Ephraim, Manasseh, and his wife being an Ethiopian. In your Bible, it will tell you that Ephraim and Manasseh they were the tribes of Israel. They were the 12 tribes. They actually made up the whole 12 tribes of Israel. You
Let
see?
me read it for you. Let me read it.
Told Arabah. Go ahead.
This is Genesis chapter 48. And it reads, let me get the verse real quick. Okay, 1 second here. It says, all right, so it says here, Genesis chapter 48, I'll start at the fourth verse. I'll start at the third verse. Genesis 48:3. And Jacob said unto Joseph, Yahweh thy Elohim appeared unto me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and blessed me. Verse 4. And said unto me, Behold, I will make thee fruitful and multiply thee, and I will make of thee a multitude of people, and will give this land to thy seed after thee for an everlasting possession. Verse 5. And now thy two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt, before I came into Egypt, are mine. And as Reuben and Simeon, they are mine.
Told
So
Arabah.
yeah, so basically, Jacob, despite the fact that they had an Egyptian mother, Jacob said these two will also be a part of the 12 tribes. They will also be a part of my lineage. They themselves will spawn a tribe of themselves of the nation of Israel, despite his Egyptian mother. Because anytime you have, even now, when you marry, a woman marries a man, usually that woman comes under that man's name. And then the children that are spawned under that relationship go under the father's name. You understand? So we have to take these things in consideration. Even with American culturalism, that still stands today. The children go underneath the father's name. Thus, they are part of that lineage. Go ahead. Okay, I think we lost the brother for a second. As soon as he get back on, we'll let him jump back in. Okay, here you go. Here you go.
Sorry about that. Yes, that is. It's just to show. The whole point is you have Hebrews mixing with Egyptians, with Yosef and Barashik, and you don't see distinctions in your Bible translation between the two. You see, thus you are of your father's seed.
Right.
But on a molecular level, there was a difference. Now, here's some things that may stand in controversy. Are we going to say that Ephraim and Manasseh are not Hebrews? Does your Bible show the difference? No, it does not. You see, that is the flesh side of things. And as we can see so far, as we've read and heard and listened to the some of the statements in the video, that can be tricky. In law, it is tricky. And I want to cover some of those things, but just right off the bat, we're talking about something that we can't physically see with our eyes. And there is a whole gamut of things that can determine your results from a DNA tissue sample. It can. So there is limits to DNA. You cannot just arbitrarily take it and say, well, the E1B1 is related to who? Or the J marker. That does not determine in and of itself who you are. It doesn't. If we had took a sample of Ephraim and Manasseh's tissue, guess what we would find? We'd find mosaicism. We'd find those two cells, wouldn't we? Would not we find there is a Egyptian chromosome there, and we would find a Hebrew chromosome there, or the mitochondrial DNA? We'd find that. We'd find those two constant cells constantly from the union of Joseph and his Egyptian wife. Same thing we would find with Ishmael. We'd find Hebrew cell and we'd find Egyptian cell because of Hagar, the Egyptian. And our people had constantly mixed with other nations from the very beginning. This does not, and this is the point, this does not identify who you are at all. What it shows is on a molecular level, we can find differences. That's what that means. Do you understand what I'm saying, Aki? On a molecular level, you can find distinctions and differences in the cells. But just because we can find an Egyptian cell, I'm going to use that loosely, and a Hebrew cell, are we going to go by that? Or are we going by, or what exactly are we going to use to prove that Ephraim and Manasseh are Hebrews, or are we going to use it to prove they're Egyptians? How does that work? Based on what we have heard so far, that doesn't work. In law, we use, they use, I'm going to go back to some history here, and I want to use some for instances when it comes down to uh, law to show you where there can be some limits.
Right.
Because you have to look at the whole gamut of things. So, and if you can, Aki, you can follow where I'm going. I'm not trying to make this difficult. Let's see if I can. I have some other information here.
Take your time. I'll bring it out.
There was a very interesting article that I found that I thought would be also helpful in this. And this comes from Vox.com. Vox.com. We want information that's readily available to us. Again, the limits of ancestry DNA tests explain. The limits of DNA ancestry explained. And here we'll go to, they have an article here that was published by Brian Resnick, May 23rd, 2019. 23andMe wants to sell you vacations based on your, guess what? DNA. But what are they really basing that on? Is the question. Identical twins have virtually identical DNA. So you would think if a set of twins both sent in a DNA sample for genetic ancestry testing, well, they would get the same exact results, right? Identical twin. I myself am an identical twin. So it might be normal for a person who's not a scientist, person who's not even in the field, just a normal average guy or female. Hey, we identical twins. That means everything about us is the same. I know there's a physical difference between us. So we're using a term that deals with something completely different other than what
Uh-oh,
you.
I got more evidence. So you just made a statement about the physical differences between twins, right?
That's right.
Right. So let
That's
me
right.
back you up on that with this video real quick
Total
because
about.
we're just bringing out information so y'all can see that this man is not pulling this thing out of nowhere. You understand?
Total
So
about.
yeah, come. Let me share my screen real quick here.
Welcome back, everybody. This morning on Rocks and Reports, popular DNA tests that claim to tell you where you are from, but the question is, how accurate are those? Okay, I really want to know the answer to this, and today National Investigative Correspondent Jeff Rossman is here to answer it for us. Hi, Jeff. Good morning. We have the results. We tested them out. Yeah, DNA tests incredibly popular, especially right now around the holidays. People are buying them as gifts. That's an easy way to find out where you came from, your heritage, your ancestry. But the big question, are they really accurate? This morning, before you buy them, we are putting 3 popular brands to the test. A simple test will tell you your ethnic origins. The claims are bold. Learn about your ancestry through your 23 parent chromosomes. Unlock your family history, trace your roots, all from a do-it-yourself kit that gets sent right to your home. To see if they work, we're trying them out using identical triplets from California, Haley, Kelsey, and Corey. Unlike regular siblings, they share the same exact DNA. We're going to test their ancestry today. We're going to test 3 popular companies. We're going to start over here with Ancestry DNA, if I've seen the commercials on TV. 23andMe and My Heritage DNA. So they're identical triplets. So within each company, the results should be exactly the same. And between the companies, first up, Ancestry DNA. Okay, so the way this one works is you have to spit it all the way up to the line. Filled with spit. They follow the directions to a T, filling their test tubes with saliva and pack up the samples. Next up, 23andMe. A kit you can buy right from the pharmacy. On this one, too, you have to fill it up to the bill. They spit and spit.
Let's get straight to the results.
Remember, since they're identical, all of these results should come back the same. Starting us off, Ancestry DNA. Now remember, you all have different last names. They had no way of knowing that you'd be related at all. But guess what? DNA match extremely high. For each one of you, it gave the other 2 names. The same as the DNA match. It looks. You want to break it down even further for you?
Shit. All right, so Salakia, this this was a report. All right, let me respond to that. Right, so this was a report of success. Clearly, this was a report of success, right, on DNA. But let's see. I'm gonna find another video real quick just to see if we can find something contrary to that. All right. So while I do that, brother, I'm gonna bring you back on, let you speak on that, and so we can give, so we can be truthful and honest about what's going on with this DNA. So give me a second. Let me find another video, but you can speak now if you want to, brother.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. The volume was a little low here and there. Just to give you a little FYI.
Okay, yeah, Salah.
Good video. It definitely explains a lot. Here's and so here's a little bit more to continue where we left off concerning 23andMe and some other DNA testing companies. Concerning identical twins. You would think that identical twins have the same DNA. Not necessarily. According to a recent investigation by the Canadian Broadcast Company, what they say is the journalists have demonstrated that twins don't often get the same results from a single company. Now, you go to one DNA company, they'll give you a set of test results. However, if you go to another one, they can give you a different set of test results. So, and you find across the industry, estimates of where an individual's ancestors live can differ significantly from company to company. In one instance, the consumer genetic company, 23andMe, told one twin she was 13% broadly European. The other twin test, meanwhile, showed that she had just 3% broadly European. Do you hear that? The same identical twin is broadly European in her DNA, but yet the other one, same twin, less than 3%. That says something, family. They have less than or just 3% broadly European ancestry and had more DNA matched to others, more specific regions in Europe. What's more, when the twins had their DNA tested by 5 companies, each one gave them different results. One computational biologist told the CBC that the differences in results were mystifying. That's strange. So, what accounts for these differences? Overall, discrepancies in ancestry testing don't mean that genetic science is a fraud. Well, it doesn't. Not the science itself. And that the companies are just making up these numbers. It don't mean that either. They have more to do with the limitations of how, here's the key, of how science and some key assumptions companies make when analyzing DNA for ancestries. But guess what? We covered that in the first few 15 minutes of this very same discussion. See, there's dozens of limitations. And these limitations can vary from company to company. You see, quality,
Right, right,
quantity,
right. So I have
food test.
I found the other video I wanted to share. Right, we want to keep balance and keep it fair. So let me play this, and then you could come back on real quick.
Tawada, Aki. You got
All
the
right,
floor.
Duana. Here we go.
Dr. Travis Stewart.
The Great Inside Edition DNA test.
You are all 99% European. But the test from 23andMe also showed some surprising differences. For example, Nicole, you're 11% French and German.
But Erica, you're 22.3% French and German.
Oh, that's weird.
And Jacqueline, you're 18%.
I'm surprised though because we came from the same egg and we have the same DNA. How are our ancestors a little different?
We sure wondered the same thing.
Well, guess what?
Let's see how the Maynard triplets did with their test from Family Tree DNA.
According to the kit you took, these are the results.
They all showed British Isles ancestry, but how is it that the range was so different? Aaron had 59%, Mandy 66%, and Melissa 70%. And how is it possible that Mandy showed 6% Scandinavian ancestry, but her identical sisters showed none?
That's weird. I mean, I don't like it.
It's the exact
no result at all.
same DNA that they tested.
Is that a little disappointing?
Very.
Not everyone was disappointed in the results. The Ancestry DNA test used by the New Jersey triplets showed that they were almost identical. It says their roots are largely from Great Britain. In fact, their Italian and Greek ancestry is exact.
Truly at heart.
So yeah, so as you can see, there are variations within the test. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
All right. So this is just the idea here is really simple so far. There is also the other factor of what they call built-in genetic error in these companies. That's what it is. Every time your DNA, the fabric of your gene, is copied, there is a chance that a small error can be made in the copying. Even a small change in the sequence of base pairs can cause havoc. This is called what is known, and I would like for you to pull up what is known as genetic predisposition. Genetic predisposition.
Okay, 1 second, I'm on it.
And there is a whole lot here. I'm going to go back to the article while you pull that up. That way you can surface through the information. So to continue where I left off at, I'll go back to it. And I'm not going to read everything that is here, but we do need to know, again, this is about the limitations of DNA. In the ancestry reports, and I'll back up just a little bit. These companies that provide ancestry testing like Ancestry.com and 23andMe deliver the precise ancestral breakdown of their customers' DNA. They might say, for example, someone's ancestry is 25% Italian, 74% East Asian, and 0.1% Sardinian. They also market their product in a way that suggests their test reveals something deeply meaningful about you. Well, that, in my opinion, is very subjective. What we need is the facts, not the fluff of the car salesman. In its ancestry reports, 23andMe says your DNA tells the story of who you are and how you're connected to populations around the world. Notice populations, not just one race. Keep that in mind. The company is now even partnering with Airbnb to help customers plan heritage vacations in places where their ancestors live. See, this is marketing. This is about money, isn't it? That part of it. MyHeritage, which is another company that provides ancestry analysis, writes, our DNA test offers you powerful experience of discovering what makes you unique and learning where you really come from. That sounds like another marketing scheme. It's a gimmick, isn't it? I mean, if you come from Sardinian and French and Asian, which one of those actually identify you? Is it the one with more percent or less percent? If you're 74% Asian, or you're 30% African, or you're less than 2% French. I mean, what does that actually say to you? My guess is not very much. You're kind of mixed up, aren't you? This is again the limitation of even the results. See, what is not always obvious from these reports, now listen to this, is that they are based on estimates that can vary from company to company and have what they call as built-in sources of error. Now,
Is this what you wanted me to pull up, Octus, on the screen?
yes, that'll be fine, and I would like for you to cover that uh, it just as soon as I am complete with this,
No sweat,
because
no sweat.
there's some keys here. Now, a little bit about an estimate. I'm a remodeler. An estimate is something that I give a customer that does reflect the scope of whatever, let's say a roof. It reflects the scope of what I can visibly see with the eye. Perhaps what I can see if I test on certain parts of a roof. And what I do is I give not an exact, precise, definitive amount of material. What I give is called an estimate. Why is it an estimate? Because just because I say something is 100 square feet, it may just be more or less. See, if I actually need, let's say, 93 feet, I'm not going to buy 93 feet of anything. Why? Because there's a factor there. When I go to purchase material, some of the material may be unsuitable for the project in which I am doing. So I give you an estimate. I cannot be exact. If I charge the customer, say, $10 for 93 feet of something, and then I get my material and there's damage to the package. See, this goes back to, and I'm using this comparison to the cells, the extraction, the quality of the actual extraction of the DNA or the type of tube. See, it works in the same way. My package may be damaged. So what we do is allow for waste. So I can't charge you $10 for 93 feet. I have to charge you more. Then there's the fact of me going and getting the material, the time it takes to bring the material. Let's say it rains. See, there's so many different factors that could affect the estimate. Estimates are not to be taken as literally what it is, but rather it is just an overall scope of what this may be or what it may not be. And in the case of DNA, all companies give you estimates. That is the built-in error. You want to know exactly where you come from. Well, how can you come from France, Asia, and China, and Africa? You yourself do not come from these places. This is just a genetic history of where you possibly could have traveled from. See, we're not understanding DNA correctly. That's what it is. We have a built-in assumption ourselves. This is why it is important to note the limitations of DNA so that you may change your own perception of what it actually means. It is more of a human genetic map as opposed to a marker that identifies who you are. And I'm not a scientist, but I have enough common sense to see that this is exactly a better definition and rendering for us as opposed to this identifies you. It does not identify you. It is a history. It is a map of the human history on a molecular level. I hope y'all understand that. So these reports are based on estimates. Your results, if you go take a test from any one of these companies, can change over time as the company signs up more users and gathers more data. In other words, a company only is limited by the test results that come in from the people that come in and take the test. These companies do have web pages that explains these limitations, but you have to dig a bit to find them. You could very easily purchase one of these kits without coming across it. And the testing itself is growing. It is growing. according to the MIT Technology Review, 26 million people or more have taken a genetic ancestry test. Well, if a company is basing its findings on 26 million people, quote unquote, but there's near about 7 billion people on the planet. So, question, does 26 million people represent 7 billion people on the planet? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. And that's where they're getting their information. This
Right.
this is subjective testing, isn't it? See? And then again, there's the whole mosaicism to factor. If these people go in, and if 26 million people go into test, what could be the limitation? Well, I'm only going to test one. I'm going to test the left arm of some, then I'm going to test the right arm of others. And then if I don't pull a good quality DNA testing from the left arm, and I don't pull the right DNA quality from the right arm, and if I don't put the DNA tissue sample in the correct tubing, and I don't use the EDTA, I'm liable to come up with error. Again, estimation. You cannot represent 7 billion people on the planet with 26 million people on the planet and still be subject to the same built-in error that we just described. That's why when you go to see, you look at twins and you would suppose, see, all of this is presupposition. We're presupposing that twins are the same when we look at them, but not on the molecular level. One's France, one's European, or one's got a majority European DNA history, and the other one is less than 3%, not widely European. Then the only conclusion you can come to is saying, well, we have the same parents, but there is a different map in one twin, a genetic map, as opposed to the other. What do we do with that? So, the Tech Review also found in 2018 the number of tests purchased surpassed the sales of all the previous years combined. These genetic tests normally cost about $60 to $100. And if more, they contain health information. As the market grows, consumers need to be aware of what exactly these tests are telling them, and even more so when it comes to information about health and wellness. See, that's what this test actually does, more so than identifying you. You see? So what does it really mean when a company tells you you're 40% Greek? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. What they say is the answer to that question is useful to understand exactly what these tests are looking for,
Right.
and the assumptions that they have to make to guess your ancestry. What's more important to understand is that genetics can guide answers about ancestry, says Joe Pickrell, a geneticist and the CEO of Ginkove, a company that sells genetic testing hardware and software to other companies. There is no time machine. There is no crystal ball. What are they saying? Mr. Joe Pickrell is saying, we're selling the test hardware to these DNA companies. The DNA companies have built in error. And again, that list of things that we discovered almost near an hour ago shows you limitations. You cannot trust and rely on these things. There's no crystal ball. He's saying there's no magic act to it. We have just come up with a way to test DNA, but it's predominantly more for health related issues. That's what we use it for. Somebody from Greek has a certain biology. Somebody from Asia has another type of biology. This is what's more important to science rather than using it as an identification marker. Again, you find out you're 40% Greek. How does that help determine who you are? Common sense would say it does not. It
Hey,
cannot.
brother, can I interject real quick?
Okay, go ahead.
Also from my research and from also watching a couple of Lex Wills videos, where he was watching some reviews of people's tests. They were saying that there's more evidence towards that they don't even really use your DNA to go back. What they do is they use your DNA that you send in to identify who you are, who your parents are, and then from there they actually use historical records, which means that when they tell you, like you said, you're the 40% Greek, that just means whoever that is that they're telling you is giving you the 40% Greek, they said 9 times out of 10, that person might not even be from Greece. That could be where they died at because they're looking through the paperwork. They're not always looking at your DNA. They're looking at who it is, and then they go in like Ancestry and me. And Ancestry tells you that too. They say that we use your DNA to find out who you are in the genetic markers, and then we compare that to the historical records, and then we give you an identity based off of your record, your family history, and other people who share the same genetic markers as you when they put up their family history, and then they find, and all they do is they make connections based on what chronological paperwork we have. Just like when I was telling some other brothers that too, they were telling me, "Oh, I got to get a DNA test done because they don't believe I'm Ashkenazi Jewish, right?" And but my grandmother's last name is Levy. I know the woman before she passed away. She's white Europeans, and and excuse me, my mom has all her paperwork when she passed away: her birth certificate, her marriage certificate, her death certificate, her children, who her children are, who her forefathers were, all of that stuff. We have all of that paperwork, and they're telling me not to trust that paperwork, but to trust a blood test that even you're saying right now is not meant to identify who you are in the past, but it's only really for medical information.
Basically, basically. When that's why, and here's a big thing too, as a point of contention for some, maybe perhaps, but I'm gonna say it anyway. In regards to your comment, um, they say King James is a Hebrew Israelite, but yet we find not only their ancestry by name, but we find their DNA. It is all the same. He's European. He's not a Hebrew Israelite. And so this is the thing that comes from the pseudo DNA chemists and the people who are telling you
Yeah,
this.
but if you
I just gotta
but
say
bro,
it.
so
It's,
you
it's
don't
just
agree that
pseudo
there's
information.
two. Let me ask you a question about that though. So you don't agree that there was two King James? There was a King James of Scotta and a King James of Normandy.
The King James of England I'm
No, I'm
referring
saying
to.
yeah, but the original King James of England was King James of Scotta, and he was overthrown by the King James of Normandy during the War of the Roses.
The same King James that authorized the translation of the Greek, the Latin, the Aramaic, and the Hebrew text when we come out in 1611 with the King James Bible, the first King James version of the Bible. He is not a Hebrew Israelite. He is
I
European.
wasn't asking you that.
Yeah,
I was
I
asking
know.
if
But
you
see,
knew
that's
there
the
was two
issue.
King James.
Right. That is the issue. And this is why I brought it up. Because most of the time people appeal to another King James, and which I'm gonna say the group, the UPK says, well, King James was a black man, and he's the one that authorized the King James Version Bible. Well, I'm sorry. DNA and their own records show that this man is not a black man. He's a European. His mother and his
So what
father,
about so what
his
about Michael
patriarchal line is European.
Strahan being a direct lineage of King James?
Well, then we're not talking about the same subject at that point, are we?
No,
Well,
that's why I was
listen,
asking if you.
we're kind of
That's
getting
why I was
off.
asking you if you understood there was two King James. I'm not saying he's Hebrews or not. I'm just saying
We're
if you
we're
understood there was two King James.
Right. Well,
we're kind of getting off topic a little bit. I kind
right.
of want to stay in the
Right.
realm of DNA,
Yeah,
but
we are though, because I just said Michael Strahan's DNA test proved that he's direct lineage of King James.
Well, see,
now
this is
I
the
heard
thing we're
what I'm
talking about limitations of
real
DNA,
quick.
the limitation of it. You see?
As far as King James is concerned, right? There are historical evidence. This is King James the sixth, and the first is the portrait painting of King James. There are DNA, so-called DNA evidence found in this book here when Scotland was Jewish to legitimize King James as a Hebrew Israelite. But that's another subject for another
Right,
day. I
right.
want to kind of get back on the DNA, but I do want to people to know and understand what my personal stance is. King James Hebrew Israelite, but me and you, Don, we can have that discussion later.
Yes, we can. So getting back to the point where I talked about Joe Pickrell, a geneticist, as he says, there's no time machine, meaning there's nothing to go back into time to validate the findings they have based on their evidence. These DNA testing companies, they're only giving you estimates. It's the same thing in my field of work. We only give evidence, evidence of this is this is not exact information. It's estimated, meaning the results can be more accurate or less accurate. That's an oxymoron. There is no exactness. There is no special crystal ball. And this is coming
Exactly.
from a geneticist.
They put so much emphasis on go get your DNA test. You're basically paying $200 for spit.
Right,
That's what you're doing. You
right.
understand? Whether they understand it or not, we have to go with the biblical narrative in which the identification markers is. And I'm going to read it real quick, and I'll give you the floor back. Real quick, this is Deuteronomy chapter 28. It tells us how to identify ourselves. Deuteronomy 28:50. Deuteronomy 28:45. It says, moreover, these curses shall come upon thee and shall pursue thee and overtake thee till thou be destroyed. Thou, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Lord thy power to keep his commandments and his statutes which he command thee this day. Verse 46. And they shall be upon thee for a sign, identification marker, and for a wonder upon thy seed forever. You understand? So we look around the world and see certain circumstances that are befalling certain people, and we have to ask ourselves, why? What is the history of this? What is the circumstances surrounding these events that will help us get a better understanding of who we are and who they are? And all we're saying is DNA is not 100% reliable. I give the floor.
To- Toda Reba Aki. Now, let's talk about this. As you mentioned about this whole spitting in the tube bit. Let's talk about it. There are about 3 billion base pairs of individual letter instructions of our genetic code. I'll say it again. There are about 3 billion base pairs, the individual letter instructions of our genetic code that make up the human genome. When you spit into a tube and send it off to a company like 23andMe, Ancestry.com, or MyHeritage, they don't bother looking at every single letter.
Right.
You've got 3 billion of them. You don't have time for that. This is where the estimation comes into play. See, why? Because that would be overkill. That's too much work. All humans have about 99.9% of their DNA in common. So instead, to speed up the process, the tests look out for the locations on the genome where people commonly vary one from another.
What she said?
Isn't that
No
interesting?
problem in there. Mm-mm.
I'm
She said
sorry, we've
one.
got some impedance. So a little bit more. The
I'm gonna call
chunks
you.
that are fed into the machine. I'm sorry. Let me get back to it. Uh, Give me just a moment. Just a moment here. I'm having some technical difficulties.
Jeremiah 7,000. What's going on?
Shalom, Mark. What's good? Nah, man. Just after a while, I was waiting for them to, talk about me and Polite's debate, but they kept harping on something else. And I know there's a lot of bitterness over there about the Bible because the Bible is so popular. It's around the world. A brother called in. He from New Zealand, and he said, "Man, this truth hit me down from the land down under." You see what I'm saying? And they don't like that. I said, well, maybe y'all got to step it up a little more. If y'all want people to gravitate toward these West African religions, then instead of talking about Hebrew Israelites all the time, start teaching about that. Don't get mad at us. Cause Kyle I believe somebody hurt his feelings in church, or somebody with one of these Catholic, watch your hands, or somebody hurt his feelings because he has a really he has something very, I don't know what, an envious spirit about people who follow this truth over here. You see what I'm saying? Then when I asked him, I said, well, I tell you what, you tell us what this Orisha and Uladu or me can do for us. I said, in 2019, I see y'all drinking a goat's head with blood in it. What is that? They don't want to talk about it.
Right.
They don't want to talk about it. But they want to steady point the finger at the Bible. Now, you explain, what the hell is that? You know what I'm saying? And then, like I said, they want to place all the blame of what's going on in their life on the Bible. No, y'all don't even believe in the Bible. Y'all believe in a different spiritual system. So you got to look at your spiritual system and why it's and why you ain't living better. Your spiritual system has let you down. You don't even believe what we got over here. So why are you pointing the finger over here? I'll use the floor.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, getting back to the whole spit in the tube bit. Again, I want to reiterate this. There are about 3 billion base pairs, the individual's letters, instructions of our genetic code that make up the human genome. And all humans have about 99.9% of their DNA in common. So out of the 7 billion people on the planet, we all have common DNA. Like, for example, RH. You either have negative or positive. As a matter of fact, on a side note, I'm supposed to have a debate this coming weekend about this very issue. But out of all of those pairs, there's billions of pairs, and the companies are not looking at every single letter. They're not. So, and they vary from one to another. And what these are spots. They're spots on the nucleotide, the molecule that forms one half of a base pair. Adenine, and I have thymine. That's it. And all these single letter changes in our DNA can help explain why one person is taller than another, or why one has brown eyes and another green. In science jargon, these variations are called single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs, pronounced SNPs. SNP. Companies can analyze 500,000 of SNPs or more in an ancestry test, but there are billions of them, 2 billion to be exact. They only analyze about 500,000. When a genetic testing company gets a tube of your saliva in the mail, it first has to extract the DNA from it. You remove the cell debris, proteins, all of the things that are not DNA. Quote, Yaniv Ehrlich, the chief science officer at MyHeritage, explains they can make copies of your DNA, then break those strands up into shorter chunks. The chunks are then fed into a machine called genotyping array. Aki, would you pull up genotyping array for us, please? These genotyping array, RRAY. These arrays kind of And this is an absolute simplification. Work like a coin sorter. They work like it works like a coin sorter. But for S&Ps, but they do it only for the S&Ps. They'll tell the companies which versions of the S&Ps you've inherited and at what location in the genome. Many S&Ps are meaningless when it comes to our health, but they can be useful starting points for tracing ancestry. That's because, like everything else in our genome, S&Ps are passing down through the generations. The more S&Ps we share in common with another person, the more likely we share a similar and more recent ancestry. Your ancestry is estimated by comparing your S&P results with a genetic database of people with known ancestries. More on this in the next section, because this is a long line of things. So right away, here's the first source of a potential discrepancy in the ancestry testing. Even though these genotyping arrays are extremely precise, they are more prone to making tiny errors. We're talking about 99.9% accuracy for these arrays, Elric says. But even with that high level of accuracy, when you process 1 million places in the genome, you might get 1,000 errors. Those small errors alone can help explain why one twin might have slightly different results from another. This source of error is why health results you get back from genetic testing companies may show discrepancies as well. You see? Now, I know that was a lot of jargon. However, the point is they're telling you exactly the limitation of DNA testing.
Is this the
Do
right
you,
thing you want to pull up here?
let's see what you got here. Yes, could you read that for us?
In molecular bio, SNP array is a type of DNA microarray which is used to detect preliminaries within a population. Salaki on that. A single nuclear preliminaries, SNP, a variation at a single site in DNA is the most frequent type of variation in the genome.
So on one cell, if you can just think about a cell, and like I say, a circle, they're looking at spots on the circle and doing their comparison for the layman. And that's where the error begins. Now, we're not scientists and we can't actually articulate these things as well. I cannot. I am not a scientist. I'm not going to make that jump over the broom, so to speak. However,
Right.
it is clear to see that this is where the location of the error in the results come from. This is where it begins. This is one of the first steps from the time you spit into the tube to the time they get it and unload it and unpack it and load it into their machine and separate, and they sort out from there. You have to remove the debris from the tube yourself. And who's to say you removed all the debris? And you do need EDTA to even test the actual sample itself. You know, remember I stated earlier about an hour and a half ago how you have to have that EDTA to as an anticoagulant. You know, so they use the saliva. There's a lot there, isn't it? You can see that. But that was the first step. Now here's the second step. We're gonna go into this too. The second step to your DNA compared to the DNA of other people with known ancestries. Errors aside, the genotyping we get from each of our consumer testing companies should should be just about identical to one another. That is, if the companies are looking at the same set and number of SMPs. But how companies analyze the raw data varies. How you analyze a subject and how I analyze a subject can be different. And it is the same way with these DNA testing companies. And that is why one company's ancestry results might look a little bit different from another. So here's how it works. Companies like 23andMe and Ancestry.com and MyHeritage companies compare your set of SNPs to known reference groups, SNPs that tend to be found in people in people of Slovakia, say Greek origin. These tests are looking for evidence that you have a common ancestor with people in the reference group. See, and I'm gonna try to put this in other words. Here's some people, they come in and they get tested. They come up with, oh, you guys, 1,000 people come, y'all have Greek origin. So when you go in and test, they're looking to see if you have the same Greek origin as these people. It's a biased test. That's the point. You see, it's biased. They're not looking for your origin. They're looking to see if you match up with the same people with the same S&Ps that they had previously. This is what they're doing. But the reference group each company uses can be different. You see, it might be the French the next time. Same 1,000 people, they all have S&Ps from the French origin. You walk in and they want to see if you match up with the French, but they may not match up to see if you're Greek. See, all of this is in the how they go about testing. It depends on what they're looking for. Inevitably, this really just means that you're going in looking for your history, your background. They're trying to test to see if you match up with these particular groups and these genotypes. It's really amazing. As stat news, I'm sorry, uh, but the reference group in each company uses can be different, and the reference groups are changing all the time, as I just demonstrated. They're changing. They may be looking for Greek, they may be looking for Spanish, they may be looking for German. It depends, and it changes all the time. And remember, they only examine about 2 million people, half a million people, or so. That doesn't represent all 7 billion people on the planet. Number two, you see, so they're limited. That's the point. As Stat News reports, people who used these tests just a few years ago are now finding their results have changed. The companies say this is a feature of their product, and that as they get better with predicting genetic ancestry, these people are predicting your ancestry. So what this is, I would liken this into all the religions in the world, the same Bible, but the Baptists interpret the same verse different from the Catholic. The Catholic interprets it different from the evangelical. The evangelical interprets it different from the apostolic follower. It's the same thing, same difference. This is about interpretation, as we have read earlier. It's about interpreting the finding rather than the finding itself. They'll pass this information uh, on to customers, what they predicted. Yet it also undercuts their marketing, which implies that their test reveals something fundamental about you, and it's not fundamental at all. It's only as fundamental to you as your relation to the common house cat, which isn't very much. Another limitation. These reference groups are largely based on people who are self-reporting their ancestry. Well, this makes it biased. These people may be pretty confident that they know where their families come from, but it's not a perfect measure. It's not. What is the point? The point is what we have is very subjective. And these limitations, which there are over a dozen already, uh, these can be deceiving and misleading. And you cannot rely on the companies for the said reasons already. How you test, what you use to test, even the equipment that is created is subject to error because it's only built on the design of the person and, whoever the inventor of the machine is. is giving the same uh, test equipment out to these DNA ancestry companies. It's not reliable. That's the point in a nutshell. It's just simply not reliable. They're looking for something different from what you expect. It's the proverbial we're comparing apples to oranges. And there's a lot more. There's a lot more. Let's see. Ancestry DNA companies can often track down European DNA to specific countries. But if you're a minority, now here's where the special interest takes place. If you are a minority, as I am, your report might be vaguer. Prior to this, prior to this past summer, 23andMe could only match people to just 3 broad regions of sub-Saharan Africa, which is an enormous area with a lot of geographic and ethnic diversity. And that's just because there aren't as many African people in these companies reference data sets. In other words, most black folks can't afford to take no DNA test. I don't care if it is just $60. The majority of us can't afford it. Number one, it's because it's just inconvenient. We don't care. We've got other bigger problems, other bigger fish to fry on a whole. You see, we're trying to keep from getting shot up most of the time, and I don't mean no pun by that at all. It's that's just where we are, just in our normal day-to-day life. And if the company doesn't have a large database for the minority, the so-called African American in this country, what does that tell you? If they're already comparing their known database for as genetics, then what does this do for the African American, who is virtually unknown? You've got the continent of Asia being full of black folks, or Africa, and all the 54 countries. They don't go around testing all of these people. They don't. You have to think about these things. Again, this is another limitation. Imagine you are from a small town in Spain, Pickrell says. If the testing companies have a bunch of people from that small town, they can match you against them really effectively. But if they don't have the people from that specific small town, they might just determine you're broadly Spanish or European. In other words, they can't tell you anything. They're gonna say, well, maybe you're Spanish or you might be European. This is again another sign of they're just guesstimating. I call it guesstimating, not estimating. One small step remains. These companies don't just match you to ancestors, they assign you, I'll say it again, they assign you very specific percentages. So an ancestry DNA test might reveal you are 23% European, 24% Chinese, et cetera, so on and so forth. This is where company programs let in the algorithm says, let's not try to put ancestors together in different combinations to get a similar variation of the SNPs that you have, Eric says. See, you notice what they're trying not to do, as opposed to what they are doing. It's looking for a best fit, not a perfect match. See, this is the truth behind it all. And it's imperfect, especially in differentiating among ancestries that look very genetically similar. It's imperfect. There is very little genetic variation in Europe, Eric says, as an example. People from England, for instance, really don't look all that genetically different than people from Ireland. They don't. That's true, he says. So the computer is more likely to match the mistake that a person's ancestors were English and not ours. You see, even though they come from another country, apologies. Then, and the computer's not making a difference, than to make the mistake that a person is English and not Taiwanese. You see? What's more, the programs have to make some guesses about how far back in time your ancestors in a particular place lived. This is also imperfect with a range of error, and it makes sense. If you wanted to know, for example, what were people DNA like in the first century, and you're going to use 20th century equipment, and you're going to use 20th century DNA, they're going to wind up trying to group you with Europeans as opposed to say the Hebrews or the Greeks. You see, it's going to be different. There's more error. That's the point. It's not going to be perfect. The computer programs are also sensitive to small errors built into the genotyping process. And again, the program's output depends on the reference DNA the company has in its database. See, this is more limitations to DNA, isn't it? If you only have 2 million people taking the test, and if the large part of them are European, what result are you going to get as a minority? You're going to
Hey,
get a lot of.
real
Go ahead.
quick, Sister Kifera wanted to bring forth some information. Sister Kifera, if you can see the screen, you want to bring out this information that you posted. You all can see it says I took 9 different commercial DNA tests and got 6 different results. Sister Kiffer, are you there? You want to read this?
Yes, I am here, but I've closed that since because I'm doing research in the back check. That's why I'm posting like that.
Oh, okay. I
Hold
just
on a
wanted to
second.
get an
I actually
opportunity to
can't
bring
see it because I'm on my phone. It's too small.
I think I can read it here.
Thank you, Brother Don.
Could you scroll up just a little bit, Aki? Scroll down a little bit, I mean. Go back up to yeah. I just want to start right there at the first line. Okay. And as it reads, the thing about me is that I am Jewish. It is not the only thing about me. I'm also 5 feet, 11 inches tall. Glasses, I wear glasses, and I am into bicycling. But most people who know me probably wouldn't be surprised to learn that most of my ancestors live in what they call chatils, or let's see, chatels in Eastern Europe. Now, I've never even heard of that. Somewhere
right.
in some small town in Eastern Europe. Uh, so it wasn't too surprising when I sent off 9 DNA samples to 3 different DNA companies under a variety of fake names, and the results indicated that I am super duper Ashkenazi Jewish. That's interesting. Super duper. That says a lot. The Ashkenazim are Jews who trace their ancestry back to Yiddish-speaking populations inhabiting the regions between France and Russia, which is basically a Yiddish people is a West Germanic people who borrowed some of the Hebrew letters, some of their words, and created their own language. Uh, and so, and that those are Europeans. So here's what is a bit surprising, though. None of the companies, Ancestry and DNA, 23andMe, and National Geographic, which works with testing companies called Helix, could agree on just how Ashkenazi I am. That's amazing. So right away, we can see as I've been reading to you from these geneticists,
Right.
these makers of these DNA machines and all of the whole process of it all in the last hour shows you, and even this guy here is showing you proof indelibly that the limitation of DNA testing should be on our conscience. We should be aware that this is not a catch-all, cure-all, to end all, to be all biblical fact of any
Right.
divine proportions. It's not, it
Right.
should never be taken as divine inspiration because that's not the purpose of it. That is not the purpose of it. And we have to understand the process of it all. In order to understand, we can't make arguments based on a flawed methodology on a molecular level. I mean, Geez, how deep do you get when you examine a cell and still come up with error? Folks, we really need to examine ourselves in this and get the knowledge. Let's see, does he have any more information on this article?
Um,
Yeah, let's read that. Ancestry DNA. So here's the first company. They looked at the first DNA sample that Live Science sent in for me and reported back that I am 93% European Jewish. The rest of my ancestry, it suggested, is as follows: 2% traces back to Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain and Portugal. 1% traces back to the European South. 1 traces back to the Middle East, and the rest come from elsewhere. If you could pull up scroll down just a little bit more, I only can see, okay. Now, if we just, I want y'all to look at this. 93% European Jewish. What is European and what is Jewish? And then you have 2% from the Iberian Peninsula. That doesn't identify who you are, does
that's
it?
a great question. What the hell is European and what is Jewish? That's a great question.
That's right. And I would, if you could, in another screen, pull up a map of Liberia, Europe, and just in the Middle East altogether. And let's try to look at some of these different places. Europe South, which is Europe, and then the Iberian Peninsula. And let's take a look at what a map would tell us based on this one company's findings. It's really amazing. It's really amazing how they, as we said earlier, the inaccuracy of it, the
A
percentage
map of
results.
Liberia, Europe.
Yeah, we definitely want to see what that is, and I'm gonna go, and I'm actually gonna go to get some history for us on my end about Liberia to complement what you're going to find on a map. It's really amazing to me looking at this, but we need to take a look at it because it's important to know about a country, and I would like for everybody to see that on the screen as we're talking and get some background about this.
All right, here it is. I got it right here.
Yeah, let's get us a good map there. And I think most of us know when we're talking about Europe, we pretty much know what that constitutes. The capital of Liberia, and that is Liberia is actually the capital of it is Monrovia, and that is the capital of the West African country of Liberia, located on the Atlantic coast at Cape Mesrado. Has a population of about a million, according to the 2008 census. 29% of the total population of Liberia. Monrovia is the country's most populous city. Now, I want to get a little bit about the history of it. In 1816, I actually want to go back further than 1816. I want to go back.
Can you see the map here? Is this a good map, or you want me to pull another?
It's good. You can just point to us where Liberia actually is.
Here it is.
That's Liberia. Okay, so the culture. Let's talk about the culture.
You have Sierra Leone right here.
That's where we seen Elder Nathaniel in Sierra Leone.
Right.
Uh, Somebody's calling me from the back chat of the Lions Den. Let's see. Let's see if we can't deal with some of his history. And Aki, if you could, since we see where it is, could you pull up a little background on them as well? I'm gonna pull up some too. Uh,
Okay.
let's get a little information on that. So we see it's in Africa. We see it's on the Atlantic coast, and that tells us some things. I'm gonna look for the history. Liberia is a country in West Africa which was founded by former American slaves. It is one of only 3 sovereign countries in the world that were founded by former slaves. Notice it keeps saying former slaves. The others being Haiti and Sierra Leone. Established by who? Great Britain. The immigration of former slaves was funded and organized by the American Colonization Society, or abbreviated ACS. The mortality rate of these settlers was the highest in accurately recorded in human. I'm sorry, let me repeat that. The mortality rate of these settlers was the highest in accurately recorded human history. Of the 4,571 immigrants who arrived in Liberia from 1820 to 1843, only 1,819 survived up until the point of 1843. That's amazing. In 1847, the ACS encouraged Liberia to proclaim independence as it no longer wanted to support it, although some northern state governments continued to provide money in the 1850s. The U.S. declined to act on the request from the ACS to make Liberia an American colony or to establish a formal protectorate over Liberia, but it did exercise a moral protective over Liberia, intervening when European powers threatened its territory and its sovereignty. And it retained its independence throughout the scramble for Africa by European colonial powers during the late 19th century. While remaining in the American sphere of influence, President William Howard Taft made America's support a priority. From the 1920s, the economy focused on exploitation of natural resources, like rubber and things like that. Now, I want to get a little bit about Liberian history. And that's amazing. It's the first American slave country. Isn't that something? Or one of them, at least. Now, let's see. Prior to the 1800s, according to historians, if you find some, Mark, let me know. I'll yield the floor. Historians believe that many of the indigenous people of Liberia migrated there from the north and east between the 12th and 16th century AD. Portuguese explorers established contacts with people of the land later known as Liberia as early as 1462. The name in that area is Costa de Pimenta, or the Pepper Coast, or Grain Coast, because some of the abundance of Meleguita pepper and became desired in European cooking. In 1602, the Dutch established a trading post at the Grand Cape Mount, but destroyed it a year later. And in 1663, the British installed a trading post on the Pepper Coast. No further known settlement by non-African colonists occurred until the arrival in 1821 of free black slaves from the U.S. Now that says a lot about this particular fellow we were reading, about some of his ancestry DNA coming from Liberia. Now here's the point of it all. I even covered that. Is he European? Is he Jewish? Or is he African? Which
Right.
one is he? You
Right.
see? That's why I wanted to point that on the map. Because, hey, what is DNA saying to him? You see? Now, again, this is the imperfection. This is the limit of DNA testing. Now, is that an accurate report? And that's just from one company. If you still have that link, let's go back to it. It's really amazing. Uh, it's really astounding, this information. It really is, especially when you go, and it depends on the period of time, especially here in Liberia, uh, who actually was indigenous to that land. It's amazing. Truly is amazing.
Which one about the one who said he gave DNA?
Yeah, giving those 9 different DNA samples to those 3 companies. And that's actually when you get a chance, forward that to my email, Aki, if you don't mind, Bavakasha, because
Got
that is definitely something to build on, and we should, all of us, have some sort of we should keep this in our argument, as like we keep the Bible, we should have
Well,
that.
I'm gonna have this link. We getting ready to wrap up here. I have this link I'm here to share with you. So this one is archived. But let me go
Hallelujah.
back real quick. Yeah, for those who are watching, we're gonna get ready to close out. I gotta get ready for a debate. Powerful information being brought out today, and it's gonna link up with the argument because a lot of our brothers on rely on DNA as a primary source. We have to really examine these things.
That's right. Rather than use subjectivity. And a lot of brothers, myself included, we say, oh well, the white man is the devil. Well, then why are you trying to rely on the devil's information? I
Right.
mean, if Satan is not giving us accuracy, then he's not giving us truth. And that's what the doctrine of the devil is. It is inaccuracy. It is indefinite meaning as opposed to definite meaning. We need high def in these days. We don't need fuzzy tube TV, do we? It's a little black, a little white, a little German, a little Russian, a little African. I mean, we need something that's solid, firm, you see. And so that's the thing that, if you do find that, that'll be good to have. Um, that's definitely something good to have. You may have too many pages open out. Sometime it does that.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll definitely be able to. And then I want to do a part 2 on this and bring out because I know you got a wealth of information. So I want to give you an opportunity to finish this on a part 2. And again, this is just the Lions Den bringing forth some some great information concerning DNA testing. Is it a reliable source, brothers and sisters? That's what we want to know, right?
Amen.
So I appreciate your time and I appreciate everyone coming on. Sister Kifara, Sister Karima, y'all bringing forth the information that y'all bringing as well. I'll try to incorporate some of those things, man. So we're gonna do a part 2 on this later, and I want you all to stay tuned. I will be having a debate on Esau, whether or not he is of the Japhetic line or of the Edomite line. All right, we're going to be bringing out some scholastic information on that, and that will be on Maccabees TV at 6 p.m. Eastern. So stay tuned. The Lion Den is staying active. And if you want to participate in debates, challenge any of our debaters, let us know, and we'll put you in the ring. All right. That being said, man, I appreciate you all tuning in, and we will be back soon with another and more wealth of information. Shalom.
Shalom. Thank you for your time, Mark.
No doubt,
Amen.